when it is that you can stop talking about race, and how can you fix the problem that racism, the many problems that racism has led to, if we can't actually talk about the thing itself, right? So Ian Lopez has a book called Dog Whistle Politics, where he says, um, uh, it's I can't remember the exact terms, but it's something like the drop kick punch, right? So like you drop race, the response of the other person is to basically kind of kick you down, and to counterpunch then makes you guilty of being a racist yourself. And I just want to encourage all of us here to, especially if you're white, to talk about racism with your white friends and your white family, and encourage them to be willing to have hard conversations about what white privilege looks like. And then, in fact, I don't have to be afraid in the same way when the police pull me over as people of color do generally, right? And that says something about whose lives actually matter.
Oh yeah, all great points. Just sort of kind of want to add it. I think Black Lives Matter just because, looking at all the different like social movements that we've had in the past like decades and stuff like that, it's the one that's probably got the most like catchy, like ring to it, catchy like title and stuff like that. So it's in a way like Black Lives Matter has grown, and I think it'll be like bigger than the actual like movement and stuff like that. And it's sad because looking at historically, it was a major organization started after the Trayvon Martin verdict and stuff like that, and not guilty towards I'm trying to forget his name, Zimmerman, George Zimmerman, and things like that. There was a group of I don't know how many, but it was black queer women and things like that who started movement. So sadly, because it was America like hates our women, hates black people, hates queer people, that it's sort of kind of it's so easy to sort of kind of vilify them and things like that. One of the things that Black Lives Matter is connected to a lot is communism and things like that, which in a way, like I'm not saying that they support communism, but if you look at their like things that they believe in, things they preach, is that the American system of capitalism it thrives off exploitation of our people of color. So our black brothers and sisters, our Hispanic, Latinx, our Native American, all those different groups, our Asian, even American, brothers and sisters and non-binary folks, like they have to be exploited for American capitalism to work. So they're saying, hey, we need to do a big sort of kind of like 180 on this, and like make sure that people have equal access and stuff like that. One of the things that I think we've seen through COVID-19 is that, the American system of capitalism has not worked. You see at many other industrialized, many bigger, not to say bigger, but like countries that are a certain on our level of like, GDP and wealth and things like that. You see that they've had way more parental and maternal leave during COVID-19. It's had more funding, have given people like, instead of just doing like a sort of kind of way of bullshit, like, rent freeze, they actually forgive and rent and stuff like that. Was America, like, we got $1,200, like, ooh, and stuff like that. Like, companies got loans, and do not forget that, like, loans have to be paid back. Now, of course, some of them were forgiven if, you were paying your payroll for like a couple months or something like that. But it's like, whereas other countries are thriving, like, A, their cases are doing better, and then B, their people like are not, where we're seeing record amount of unemployment, records amount of, eviction, stuff like that. Just sort of kind of looking back to Black Lives Matter, like they're saying, hey, there is a problem with the way that we accumulate wealth in this nation that doesn't include everyone, and because of that, that's automatically just communism. And we know, like from the Red Scare, we know from like the 50s, 40s. Can't remember the like fake McCarthy. I think McCarthyism and stuff like that. That communism is such like a bad word in this country. So like they know that like if I can connect this movement that I hate because it's giving black people's rights to communism, that it's so easy to like get people on their side and things like that. Like with QAnon, like there's this big conspiracy that George Soros, which I low-key don't know what he is. I just know he has a lot of money. Like it's like funded. Like I remember we had a protest in my hometown, in my school's hometown of Pembroke, North Carolina, where there were people. Sadly, it was people that were like in the community that was in another racial group. They were sort of kind of just out there saying, well, they're getting paid. Like we're gonna be bringing buses of people. We're getting paid, and I'm like, I ain't got near one check. I just had to spend my last $20 if I get paid to like, get like sanitizer and face masks. I'm like, where's George Soros at? Like, stuff like that. But I just start kind of going back to the point where it's so easy to vilify Black Lives Matter because it's led by some of the most, which I know we'll go into intersectionality later, but it's led by some of the most like marginalized and oppressed people, a black queer woman. Like that's sort of like checking all the boxes of oppression and stuff like that. So yeah. Next we're going to go into the purpose of Black Lives Matter and the intersectionality of the movement. So the question I want to ask to the Panel Circon, like, I know Circon talked about like the intersectionality that includes in Black Lives Matter and Circon. What do you see like the general purpose of the the movement?
You said like how the movement involves intersectionality.
Yeah.
Okay. So as previously stated, very little known fact that the Black Lives Matter movement was started by 3 queer Black women. Very important. And I personally, when I say Black Lives Matter, I mean like every single Black Life matters, from gay to trans, man, woman. The intersectionality is implied, though there is homophobia that exists in the Black community. I was on Facebook, that's where you find all the haters, and uh, not someone I followed, but it was reposted that you can't be gay and support Black Lives Matter because you need a man and a woman to create more Black lives. I was like, huh? That really took me. And of course, it was an old Black woman, and you know how the old people be. So it's just like, that is something we fall into with our own community, but the intention of Black Lives Matter, the fact that it was started by, you know that 3 Black queer women didn't weren't looking at men to be the leader of Black Lives Matter. They weren't saying only their lives matter. It seems like, on a bit of a tangent, it seems like the men of the Black community get like a higher treatment than the women, as it would go for any community. Women are more oppressed everywhere. And I know for a while it felt like, why George Floyd when, Sandra Bland, Breonna Taylor, feels like the men's voice is being lifted more often. And, the men want to be treated by the woman, but then when it turns around, like Tory Lanez and Megan Thee Stallion, it's a whole different conversation. Then the man wants to be lifted up by the woman, but then the man also oppresses the woman. So that sense of intersectionality is kind of worked in many perspectives. It's something we need to work on the inside. But we are, as a whole, the movement is looking at all Black lives. Black trans lives matter was also trending for a while after these Black trans women were attacked. I forget where, but they were violently attacked and had to be hospitalized. Black women matter. You can buy that at godisdope.com. I have that shirt that says Black women's lives matter. And just a reminder that when we say Black lives, we mean all Black lives are equally important and should be equally valued within our community, within the entire world.
Yeah, to go off what Faith is saying, just the toxicity of the Black male patriarchy, patriarchy in general. Hopefully you guys saw this over this summer, but there was a Black Lives Matter activist by the name of Oluwatoyin Salah. I'm saying that right, but she was in many of the marches for George Floyd and many of the Black men that died over the summer. And she was killed by a Black man, and to me that really speaks volumes about how poisonous patriarchy, homophobia, transphobia, and sexism is. In addition to racism, we have to be cognizant and be against those issues as well. Because as we're saying intersectionality, we're looking at different categorizations, different aspects of people's identity that affect their oppression. Black women experience selective pressures that Black men don't have to face because they're women. Black trans women face selective pressures that Black men and regular Black women don't have to face because they have a different identity, a different layer to their personality that is different from everybody else's. But that doesn't mean that their treatment or access to rights or prosecution in the criminal justice system or access to a proper education should be different either. And so the Black Lives Matter really speaks to the patriarchy that exists in society, but also the patriarchy that needs to be dismantled within the Black community as well, because that is a form of, that's also inhibiting cultural progression of Black people. Because if you think that Black women don't deserve the same rights or deserve the same respect or reverence that Black men do, then that's sexist, first of all. And second, that's putting behind somebody else that's the same color as you. We should stand together, regardless of gender identity or sex identity, because sometimes there are things that you can't control, and you shouldn't be treated differently because you choose to identify with one thing or the other. And some people have very complex identities. Some people are genderqueer, some people are androgynous, and they don't have this linearity or this simple understanding of their identity. So you have to respect their identity, but you also have to advocate for them in the same way that you advocate for yourself. So Black men, Black queer POC, Black women need to ride together.
You reminded me of, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
You reminded me of something. I was on Tinder, horrible search story. And there's this one Black guy, your same skin complexion. And you know how they have like the passions tabs now? I don't know if any of you are on Tinder, don't do it. But they have these passion tabs now. We can like show like, oh, my passion is golfing, my passion is drinking, my passion is, one of the passions can be Black Lives Matter. So this dark skinned man has a passion that says Black Lives Matter, but in his description, he said, if it's not snowing, I ain't going, as in he only dates white women. So that just reminds me of like the odd like hatred towards Black women that you find in Black men so often these days. I don't know if you guys are on Twitter, which you should be, but there's this one video, it was a TikTok of this line of Black men, and it was like one side said white girls and one side said Black girls, and so the joke was to run to the side that said white girls. And so all of these, like when I say dark skin, that's showing that they have a Black mom and a Black dad, but they choose to hate on Black women. For whatever reason it may be, it will never be acceptable, but I'm sorry that they have that in their hearts. But so they all ran to the white girl side, showing, again, this anti-Blackness towards Black women. So you cannot fully support the Black Lives Matter movement, especially if you do not support Black women. That's one of the most important parts of it, because these are the Black women are the ones who are leading this movement. You said that woman was in charge of all these movements. A woman was in charge of the movement I went to in Columbus, and three women created this entire movement. So to be a true advocate for Black Lives Matter, you have to also support a Black woman, because they're the most important part of our community.
Yeah, and this just reminds me of having anti-Blackness within the Black community. If you all tuned into the Breonna Taylor, the unjust verdict, you saw that the lead district attorney on the case was Daniel Cameron.
I hate that.
Yeah,
with all my heart.
And so what Daniel Cameron did is an example of anti-Blackness in the Black community. And activist Tamika Mallory, she said, what rings true for so many Black people is that all skin folk ain't kinfolk. You cannot trust Black people who do not ride for other Black people, who use their power or positionality to bring justice to the Black community. What he did is he betrayed us, but had the audacity to get on national television and claim his Black identity. But still, he's fraught with so much whiteness and so much internalized hate that he doesn't even believe what he's saying. He doesn't even exhibit what he's saying through his actions and through the power that he had to change the entire course of the case and bring justice to Breonna Taylor.
So three things. First one, the beginning of Charles Mills' The Racial Contract, book that I teach in my intro class, you should come take it, is when white people say justice, they mean justice, right? And in so many ways, that is precisely what Black Lives Matter is arguing against, right? It's actually trying to imagine a world in which justice doesn't mean just white people, just justice for white people, right? The second thing is, my fellow panelists have brought up lots of ways in which Black Lives Matter is really intersectional in terms of gender and sexuality and gender identity. There's also an enormous number of disabled activists who are a part of Black Lives Matter. And the other thing is, in fact, like the true radical left in the United States today is in fact in Black Lives Matter in terms of critiques of capitalism and its excesses, right? And so really looking at how capitalism and racism have grown up together, right? So that when we look at the arguments of the pro-slavery writers in 1850, and they say, we need a society in which the lowest class does not have the capacity to vote, because in fact, that's the only way to keep white privilege. It turns out that's not wrong, right? And that is the endpoint of capitalism in some really fundamental way. Slavery is one of the true expressions of capitalism. And then the third thing is, if we look at the history of sort of anti-racist slash Black justice, Black freedom movements in the 20th century. I think of people like James Baldwin and Bayard Rustin, who were incredibly powerful advocates for racial justice, and who had to hide the fact that their sexuality was not straight, right? And that led to an enormous amount of conflict and sadness and isolation on their part, to the point that James Baldwin just kind of chucked it all and moved to France and was like, at least here, I can be me and all of me, right? And so what I find so promising about the kind of contemporary manifestation of the Black freedom movement in the United States is that this is a movement that is truly intersectional in ways that that organizing around racial justice and organizing around gender justice and a whole variety of kinds of justice. That these movements feel as though they're coalescing and focused on race clearly, as it should be, but also understanding that there are many ways of experiencing life within the sort of spectrum of racism, of race, that their gender and sexuality, etc. So I'm heartened by the intersectionality of this movement, and it really does feel like it's a potential sea change in American life.
Yeah, all great, definitely, all great points. One of the things I wanted to bring up, sort of kind of going back to like, Black women and stuff like that. I don't know if you call a stand of Meg like a Meghead, a stallion. I know there's like Barbies and I don't know how many listen and stuff like that. But like, I'm definitely 100% on team Meg and stuff like that. And like we've seen sort of kind of like in these like past couple of weeks, when WAP, however you say it, came out, and it's like, people are like, oh my gosh, they're doing so much bad for their children. Well, I don't think Meg has children yet, but and of course she doesn't have to designate her women and things like that. But it's like, Cardi B, or like she has a 2 or 3-year-old daughter, and now she's making a good point and stuff like that. And it's like, well, where's this criticism been when like Black men, or just like men in general, have made music that's like, I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna not call, and I'm gonna do that. I have a job here, I can't say exactly, lyrics and stuff like that. But you get what I mean. Like, there's been such explicit movement about what they're gonna do to women. A lot of time exploiting a woman and stuff like that. Whereas like when Meg and Cardi just like, I'm secure to bad, they be like, oh, they just trying to make money and stuff like that, and, blah blah blah. So it's just sad, like seeing like sort of kind of this double standard we have set for women. Like women have to be, submissive and stuff like that, whereas men can be, over dominant and like over toxic with like how they want to treat women, because that's like seen as like macho or things like that. And sort of kind of this, like, I know we said about Tory Lanez, it's like sad. For example, like the whole situation, we had men saying like, well, she want to be independent, so that don't mean that, like, we shouldn't have to be like standing up for her, or like, because Megan Thee Stallion is like 6 foot, I think 6 foot, I don't know her exact height.
She is?
How tall is she?
She's tall.
She's tall.
It's 5'10".
Wow.
So like, she's tall. I don't know, but she's tall. She's taller than average woman and stuff like that. So just seeing that, and like how people are like, because she's tall and like because she's muscular and she's a stallion and stuff like that, that because all these things, like she basically that she's a man. And it's sad when like, because I remember like one of the things that we hear about Michelle Obama. I don't know why a lot of people that like hate Obama to the guts, they love to say like, that's the first gentleman or something like that. And it's like they called him out for that. When our own community does that to like Meg and like to other women who like sort of kind of don't feel like this submissive standard, and sort of kind of just like, oh, I was just joking or something like that. So I don't know. I said a lot of stuff, but just basically just talking about like, our Black women like in our community are in a way sort of kind of just like, and just going back to Tory Lanez, I gotta go back to Tory Lanez. Like, I'm not saying that if someone has a good catalog of music or if someone's a good artist that you should be quick to defend him. But I'm like, he made He made a remix to the Proud Family. He covered. I know none of you know who Brown Stuff is. It's an R&B group from like the '90s. He made a cover of one of their songs, and it's just like, he makes. I'm like, y'all are like, this is your hill you're gonna die on for a man that literally just does karaoke music or something like that. It's like he's not even that good of an artist, and it's like, and it's sad because he like, instead of just saying like, I'm gonna do an IG live, I just talk about like, what really happened. I don't think there was any like, I don't think there's any reason like you could be like, yeah, I shot Meg, and like would have been like, that's justified, because I know Meg's not out there ready to like, fight or like, kill, someone and stuff like that. But it's like, instead of that, he's just like, oh, here's my album, and it's like people are actually like listening to it, and it's like, okay, you're exploiting the situation, so it feels like you're not even really trying to get like justice or like to show that you were like actually right. It's just like you're using this moment where like people actually are talking about your name because like 10 people probably listen to your music a month, and stuff like that. So it's just like, going back to the point of like, I think in our community, black women sacrifice so much, they uplift our like black men so much and stuff like that, whereas black men they don't do the same. And so we're kind of talking about what Faith was saying about like the TikTok and stuff like that. It's sad because it leads to like sexism and patriarchy. Because for so long we've been taught that like white women are submissive and stuff like that, that they'll do whatever for their man, but it isn't true. Of course, if you're someone that chooses to do that, yeah, that's fine. If you don't, I'm a feminist and stuff like that. So I'll be like, whatever you want to do is whatever you do. But it's sad that's penetrated the black community so much that we see black women as like people that black women is like not submissive. So like that there's a lot of black men that just want to like choose a white woman because they've been told that misnomer or that stereotype that white women are more submissive. I mean, look at last night. We've seen like you've seen the pictures of like Kamala and stuff like that for different like expressions and stuff like that. And there were just people saying that like she came off too strong, she too aggressive. I'm like, you really just had like a man just tell like another grown man to shut the hell up on stage and stuff like that, or to call him an idiot and a racist, but like that's not strong enough. Where it's like, oh, it just makes you smirk and be like, she can't do that. And it's just like, I'm saying a lot of stuff, but it's just rooting back to like the intersection of like how there's so many issues that we need to address, and like into our black women are seen at the forefront, into our black trans men, women, our androgynous people, our non-binary folks in the black community are put to the forefront. We're never going to be the same. I know with like George Floyd, there was a video and stuff like that, so it was pretty cut and dry. There's someone that's like, I'll just to be devil's advocate, you're an asshole and stuff like that. So like I understand like why his thing got so big, but it's like it took so long for Breonna Taylor to actually get the recognition that shit. Like there was people like like it's been 100 something days and Breonna Taylor hasn't got justice but and stuff like that. So it's sad like how George Floyd's thing exploded so much, but Breonna Taylor took so long to fuck. It's because she was a woman and stuff like that. It wasn't just like that. So I said a lot, but all right. Anything else on this topic, y'all?
It reminded me of this story of the issue we had in this humongous group chat we're in, where he's gonna be mad I reminded people of this, but one of the people in our group chat asked, in part of our language, he said, "Question: Is Meg Thee Stallion a nigga?" And we were just like, "Why would you say that?" And so he was mad for being called out about it, and we were mad that he said it. I'm just like, first of all, you could have asked, "Is Meg Thee Stallion a transgender female," or something along those lines, to be more politically correct. And two, is it because of the things you said? She's tall, she has a strong build, she's called the stallion, which is stallion that is a male horse, and just these stereotypes that like take away her womanhood just for like the sake of, I don't know if he was trying to be funny for using that kind of language, but like to take it away for the sake of a joke, almost, that this is something that can't be joked about, because when a black woman is stripped of her womanhood, that makes her a target for even more violence than you already have presented to you as a woman. Because it's like, yeah, she got shot in the foot, but look how big and intimidating she is. She's still a woman. She's not bulletproof just because she's tall. Like things that are used as excuses to justify an attack woman. Even my friend who listened to the Tory Lanez album and was just like, I just kind of wanted to hear a side of the story. I was like, she got shot in the foot. What does this 4 foot self have to say? Like, it's amazing that, yeah, he's like, there's the true story, there's Megan's story, and there's Tory Lanez's story. I'm just like, okay. Because it's just like, you gotta be kidding. How are you gonna justify a grown man shooting a grown woman?
Fundamentally, it's like the same logic that police use when they murder black men. It's like they kind of strive in these over masculine traits. Like in the case of Michael Brown and Ferguson, Darren Wilson kind of described him as this big kid coming towards him who was like still resisting the gunshots that he had fired at him. Well, Michael Brown was just an 18-year-old kid. And so if you paint Meg Thee Stallion as this over masculine woman, that's you trying to justify her getting shot in the foot. Because you're saying that, well, she's so big, she's so strong, so you have to find a way to take her down. Because look at him, he's so short, he's so little. It's sad that you see black men perpetuating this same narrative and utilizing this same type of logic that is used against us every day in interactions with the police.
And I want to go on a tangent about what you said, sort of kind of about like over masculine are making these like dramatic things about like our black men that are killed by like the police and by like justice and things like that. Let's talk about Kyle Rittenhouse. I can't curse, but like I don't care what
Also
I say
hate
this, to
him.
be honest. But like
My heart.
like we see these like black men when they're on trial, if they even make it to trial, like when they're killed, they start kind of giving all these like different stereotypes. Of like I don't know, I hate the media. Like I'm not definitely one of those fake news people, but I hate how the media perpetuates it. Like we got to find the worst picture of him holding a 40 or with a blunt or something to like make it look bad. Whereas we see on the flip side, we see like I'm not gonna say Tucker Carlson, hate that man and stuff like that, an excuse for like a living being and stuff like that. Who at the same time like will say that same stuff and like call Black Lives Matter a terrorist organization will be like, well, Kyle earlier was cleaning off buildings and he is he's a Boy Scout or he was in the future police cadet. I don't know exactly what it was and stuff like that. So it's like you see all these people like at the same time trying to like justify like, wow, Kyle was this innocent small boy or something like out there. And I'm like, he was 17, right? I'm definitely not saying someone like 17 is like, grown, mature and stuff like that, and their brain is like, fully and that, but it's like we're like, we have these things where like we're treating these black men who have been even killed, like just even look at the things they said about specific names, I can't even remember. What's the
Tamir Rice?
Yeah, Tamir Rice, like they try to vilify him and like try to make him older than like a 12-year-old boy who was playing with a toy gun and stuff like that. But when it comes to like him and to like other people, like, I don't want to talk about the I'm forgetting some of the names. The guy from Stanford who like sexually assaulted. Yeah, Brock Turner. Like Brock Turner, like they were just like he had such a good future and stuff like that, and he was I don't even know what grades he had, stuff like that. But you see like how like the media try to like portray him as like this innocent kid or something that just like like made a mistake. I'm like, a mistake? Okay, I guess rape's a mistake or something like that. It isn't. I guess it's, but it's like, how can you say that? But at the same time, we've seen black men who've been thrown into the system for alleged sexual assault against like a white woman, but because we feel like in this nation that we have to protect our white women because they're so vulnerable and they are dainty and stuff, and like, oh, don't curse in front of a white woman, she can't handle, bad words and stuff like that. Or like, don't give her the like, you've seen the things like, don't give her the newspaper she can't handle, like, the real news or something like that. Because we see that perpetuated for so long, we see them as like this black man is like such an anti or like a villain whenever they date a white woman or whenever like they're around a white woman. So like anytime that they say like, they're gonna automatically find some way to like vilify them or like indict them and things like that.
I know we have more things to go to, but you just brought up a really important topic about just the power of white privilege and how it like how any of you could use it against any of us at any time. And it's honestly, I've always wanted to say that to a group of white people that you have a power against us that you could use without even realizing it. If any of you white women were to accuse Jaleel of sexual assault, he'd probably get expelled and thrown off this campus and possibly thrown in jail just because he's a black man of a lower income class. And we like don't have the power in this country to defend ourselves. Any of you white men could assault me at any point and you most likely get away with it, especially if you're like a frat boy or a athlete or just someone who is well off, because that's just the power that you have just because of your skin color and just because of how you're raised and where you got the opportunities to grow up. And it's honestly terrifying. Like, as a black woman who doesn't have a taser, I can't walk to I don't feel comfortable walking around at night because I know anything could happen to me at any time, even in this tiny little school. And especially with these masks, a lot of you look the same to me because I don't know you. And so anything could happen and I would not be able to say he did it. I'd just be able to say a white man did this to me and they'd be like, you're fine, or something dismissing and oh, we'll look into it, and then 4 years later it just kind of fizzles out. Stuff like that happens all the time. Brock Turner, I think about that a lot because he was a swimmer, because he was white and because he was upper class, he only got 6 months in jail for raping this woman, and it's because the judge said, I don't want this to ruin his life. His life deserves to be ruined because he just ruined someone else's life forever. These victims don't get over this stuff. It's traumatizing and takes over them forever. So just to understand that you all as white people, I think, yeah, all of you, it's just something that you have in your being. You have to be, I want you all to be like super conscious of that, because without you even realizing it, anything you say or do can be held against us and not against yourself. One last tiny story. There was this one story I watched. We had this whole documentary about Black Lives Matter in the Central Columbus area. And this one woman told us a story of how when her son was about 2 years old, they went on a play date with this white family and their 3-year-old daughter. And so they were watching their children play, and a white girl falls over, and the little black boy is nowhere near her. And so she starts screaming and crying, saying that he hit me. And it's like, no, he didn't, stop saying that. And so they eventually, like, she was unconsolable, so they took her away. And so the mother of the black boy hears the father of the white girl say, well, he didn't mean to. Showing that if she screams and cries enough, then she can convince people of what she wants them to think. Because the little black boy did not put his hands on her at all, but the father still gave her the validation that, oh, well, he didn't mean to. He didn't mean to touch you. It's okay. It's not his fault. Saying that just because, your precious little, delicate little girl wanted something, then she'll get it. So it's just a dangerous thing to have that power, and you have to be as conscientious as you possibly can, or else you're gonna hurt somebody without even realizing it.
Ooh, just to add on to that real quick. There was a incident in New York, this is New York City over the summer, where a black man was bird watching. Black people were bird watching, y'all. Black man was bird watching, and a white woman was in a park, and she had her dog with her. And so in this park, you can't have your dog with you without a leash on. So she just walking around with her dog without a leash. And the black man tells you, you can't be here without having your dog on a leash. And she frantically jumps away from the black man, and you can hear this in her tone, her inflection, her diction, that she is so scared that she is being harmed by this black man. It calls the police, saying there's a black man attacking me and my dog, when they're like 12 feet apart, and the black man is just as calm as can be. And so back to what Faith said, it's in every aspect of your behavior that could be like the demise of any of us, because the power of white supremacy and the white privilege that you possess in a system of oppression.
So one of the most, I study how racial violence turns into political action. That's one of my areas of expertise, particularly looking at when people die, right? So one of the things about that instance this summer was that my recollection, and I don't remember the exact things, but that story broke on a Monday, and George Floyd was murdered on a Wednesday, or it became news. And I actually think part of the reason, of course, it's horrifying to watch the footage of him being murdered by a police officer. But I think seeing the moment when the white woman clearly goes into hysterics, she goes when she's not actually being threatened in any way, and goes from leave me alone, I have my dog, to really shrill, calling the police, saying, he's threatening me. That the juxtaposition of her utter and complete misbehavior and abuse of sort of the vulnerability that Black people experience from the police, in comparison to the kind of vulnerability of George Floyd's body at the hands of the police, that those two things in really quick succession made clear a whole variety of things to average white people who somehow thought this wasn't their problem, and that they themselves would never do anything like accuse a Black man of attacking them, right? So them happening in such short succession, I think, is a really important part of that story. I also think that I've had this conversation with many white people, which is white people are also vulnerable to police violence. And in fact, it's in the interests, not to rely purely on interest, we should be relying on justice, right? But that it is in the interests of white people to work against police brutality against people of color, because the violence that police perpetrate on people of color ends up hurting white people as well, right? And so like just from a position of self-interest, which again should not be the thing that motivates you, justice should be the thing that motivates you, right? But improving the sort of safety of people of color will make everyone's lives noticeably better, right?
I mean, hey, like you said, I started kind of thinking about, I think it was like a Mean Girls meme someone made, where like someone talks about black on black, not black on black, but like, like violence against black people, against police, and they're like, well, white people get killed too. And they're like, you're not mad, you're just like, it doesn't affect me. I was like, so it's like, if you're gonna bring that too, like, you should be mad. Like, I've seen stories of like, there was a white young autistic kid that got killed because the police mistook him, to kind of have like a fit or something as like violence, and it's like you don't see like white lives matter, that it's not a real thing, but like the white lives matter people like out there protesting because like they just simply don't care. They think because like it's justified in some way, and I'm trying to get back to the point. But like I remember like I think it's been a big thing like over COVID, especially like since June, is like Karen Bussin are like posting a video of like that white woman in like Target. It's always Target for some reason. Like getting mad about like stuff or like saying like I don't need a mask, Constitution and stuff like that. It's like it's good that someone's finally seen this, but like think about all the like Karen situations that have like ended in arrest and stuff like that. I think about the situation where, and like you've seen it in all the movies like in the suburbs and stuff like that, or like the kids are still on lemonade and stuff like, and they ain't got no permit, and like they're like fine, but like there was a video of a little black girl selling I think bottles of water trying to fundraise to get to Disneyland, and I was like, as someone that used to work, I'm like, you're gonna sell all the bottles of water and stuff like that for that. But just simply like, seeing her like having this cute idea to like sell bottles of water, and this woman comes up and she says, I'm gonna call the police. She never called the police, but she faked calling the police. And it's like she knew that power of the fear that black people have against the police, because we know that that girl could have done a t-shirt. We know that that girl could have been on like CNN with a not mugshot, but like with a picture showing like when her funeral date is. So she knows that police interactions for a lot of black people can end that. Like she used that power. So I think it's like we need to check that privilege and stuff like that. Which is actually our next topic. So I'm glad I we stepped into it. But like as a black man who like goes to Granville, goes to Newark, Heath, I hate going to Heath, or she's going to Heath. Like Heath has like the mall and stuff like that. Like I'll go to Newark because I have a girl and stuff like that. But just like going through these like different places in like Licking County, and especially like through Granville, where like excluded people like that work on this campus, like like Dr. Miller, Trinity Jeter, and stuff like that, Dean Farley and stuff like that. Seeing that like there's not a lot of black people are in Granville if you haven't noticed. So like as I when I'm walking through the village or something like that, when I'm driving through, like am I like I have to constantly think like, am I being seen as a threat? Am I going to do that? Like, if I get pulled over by a cop, is it going to be a good interaction? Or am I going to have to be like really on edge? I think about it like, I have a lot of like, a lot of my best friends are white men and stuff like that. Which, by the way, just because you have a black friend or Jewish grandchildren doesn't mean that you're not racist. Sorry, I do another debate jam and stuff like that. But it's like, seeing them like, what if in the future, like, sort of like what she was talking about during that situation, like, what if like we have they have a play date and I'm taking the kids to get ice cream or something like that, or like I'm in, like taking care of temporarily for like their kids, stuff like that. Someone gonna be like, are you okay? Blink twice or stuff like that. Which you think like that's a real like extreme, but like we've seen it happen where this guy who was like a babysitter and stuff like that was taking care of like 2 or 3 like white kids, and like this white woman like refused to stop falling because she thought he was in danger. I'm pretty sure kids would be like happy jump around and stuff like that with like a complete stranger. Like it'll be different if they were just like crying or just like fighting with him. But I was like, I'm pretty sure not gonna be like, yeah, let's go get ice cream or something like a stranger they just like just left them or stole them or something like that. So it's just all these things are related to like we need privilege checked and stuff like that. And I'm going to talk more about that, but that's our next thing about performance allyship. But anyone else have something to say about checking privilege?
I just want to follow up on something that Faye said, which is white privilege is a kind of power, right? And white people can decide what to do with that power. You can either use it to perpetuate white privilege, or you can use it to undercut white privilege, right? And again, in the interest of justice, it should definitely be door number 2. So recognize that you have that power, right? Even if you are in a group who's been excluded from power on other levels, right? As a woman or as a poor person, or as someone who is disabled, recognize that whiteness is a kind of power. and then you can decide whether to use it in service of justice or injustice.
So we'll go on, or we're not running out of time, but we'll make sure there's enough time for you guys' questions. But the next topic is one of my favorite ones that's kind of come out the last couple months is performative allyship. So I'll let any of you start on that.
Let me start on that because there's this one, but there's one guy, you know this guy, and he gets on my last freaking nerves. And we're not the cussing spell, right?
Yeah, you first.
Yes, my last fucking nerves. And so this dude. So I don't know if you all consider Jewish a race. I don't know what's a race, but whatever was just like, you got a chill white man. He's just like, I'm not white, I'm Jewish. I'm just like, if you were to cut your hair and walk down the street and not wear a yarmulke, you look like a white man. And instead of acknowledging the fact that he has that white privilege, he instead pretends that he is not white or right appearing at all, and kind of uses that as almost a tool against us, because like, you're wrong for profiling me because I'm Jewish. And I'm just like, well, you're wrong for not listening to me because I'm a black woman that you're not helping. Just because you know about black issues, I guess, doesn't mean that you have any like high standing above any of us. It feels like he doesn't want to help, he just wants to be correct and be like, well, I know this. And it's like, great, now what? Because just because you know that that is happening and you have Black and POC friends doesn't mean that you're helping us in any way. Yeah, we all know this is happening. We all saw it on the news. Literally everybody in America who has access to a TV or a newspaper knows what the heck is going on. It's what you do about it that makes you an ally. Just being a white guy in a group of black friends does not mean that you're an ally. It means that you're a white guy in a group of black friends. It's like, the performativeness is getting on my last nerves because it's always just like, it's never wanting to take in the information that is being given and accept it being corrected. It's, no, it's just this. And I was like, no, it's that. One time he touched my friend's head. You don't touch a black man on the head, and especially anywhere without his permission. And so I was just like, bro, did you touch his head? And he was just like, yeah, it was just like a ball check since he's bald now, haha. I was just like, you don't touch a black man on the head. And he said, it was just a ball check. Not wanting to be corrected at all. I was just like, you don't do this specific thing because of this specific race. And he's just like, it's okay. No, it's not. Again, you're still presenting white passing, even if you do think Jewish is a race, and you're a white passing man who's doing these things that making us as black people uncomfortable all the time. And instead of accepting that, you're just taking it as like a joke or as though you're being too naggy and stuff like that. And it's just like quite abysmal to know that you're gonna surround yourself with all these black people just to be like, I'm progressive and not do anything with all of that.
To add on what Faith was saying, that's kind of how that performative allyship starts when you are being corrected by a person of color who actually experiences these things from day to day living life. Your entire lives have been infected by white supremacy, and you refuse to listen. That right there makes you more ignorant. You're exercising your white privilege, and not in a way that serves the interests of justice, as Dr. Poole was saying, but in a way that actually perpetuates white privilege over and over again. And back to the thing that Faith was saying, of course, white people have different identities. You can be white and Jewish, you can be white and queer, but as Dr. Poole was saying, you're still white, and you still have power and privilege over other people. Like, poor white people still had it better than slaves did. Because simply for the fact, because they were white, right? They were able to be indentured service. They were compensated for their services, while slaves were taken advantage of for their services, not paid and degraded in the process, the 400-year historical process. And so if you refuse to acknowledge that your white privilege places you in a position that will forever be, that is better than what black people have, and you don't use that positionality to assist, you are part of the problem. Now, you can say that you're not racist, so that you have black friends, that you were raised around black people in a black neighborhood, but you're still white. That doesn't go away because you're around black people. And it never will go away. But what you can do about that is be anti-racist And we'll get into that later, but there's a very clear distinction between being non-racist and anti-racist. In order for you to be anti-racist, you have to exercise that white privilege in a way that fosters equity and justice for people of color. And you have to be willing to sacrifice some things. You have to be willing to give up your white privilege sometimes in the interest of other people. And that's what's truly going to move us forward. But if you don't listen to what people of color have to say, you're going to bask in that ignorance and you're going to continue to perpetuate white superiority.
So much good stuff going on here. Yes. Okay, so I'm just going to make a short recommendation. I'm an academic. It's basically always like, I have a book you should read. So I have an article that I highly suggest by Jaleel Poole, and I think it's called Black Losses, White Grievance. And one of the things that she points out is in the response to Black Lives Matter of All Lives Matter, right? She says, absolutely, like white lives are also precarious in this country, but they're precarious in a very different kind of way, right? So like Black bodies are dying in the streets. And white precarity is often about economic insecurity, right? Precarity that Black people also experience because we live in a capitalist world and precarity is built into the system, right? And so what are white losses? White losses are often very symbolic. A loss of status, not doing as well as your parents, a sense of decline, right? A sense of sort of rural white people feeling as though they're looked down on by elites in cities, right? And like, not to say that those aren't significant, right? But in comparison to actual bodies, they are kind of insignificant, right? And this sense of grievance, because I'm not doing as well as I expected I would do, right, is deeply, deeply solipsistic, right? And so I really encourage those of you who are white to think, and I really like the way that Jaleel phrased it, like, what am I willing to give up to undercut my own white privilege, right? What am I willing to do in concrete ways, whether that is feet in the street, whether that's additional money that I have that I give to Black-run organizations to make choices that make sense for them, rather than me saying, here's my money, it should do X, right? What is it that I can do materially, spiritually, physically, right, to support movements that are doing work for those communities, right? And being willing to say, I am so sorry. I misspoke, or I was being ignorant, and thank you for correcting me. Those are really hard things to say, but I don't think white people are going to actually understand what's going on until we're willing to admit that we don't know everything, right? And to actually listen to the experiences of other people in a meaningful way, not just to not to perform it, but to actually listen and hear what other people are saying.
And we have one more point, but we'll save it near the end, like make sure that we get time for Q&A. But just one thing I sort of kind of, when I heard Foreign Fellowship, I think about the SNL skit with Dave Chappelle, about them watching they're having like a election night watch party in 2016, which seems so long ago and stuff like that. And like, you know, his white friends are like freaking out and stuff like that. Whereas he's like, white people have been through this before and stuff like that. Trust and believe, majority of Black people, don't miss 45 and stuff like that. Even though he says he has this one African American, never met the guy. I think the guy was like, yeah, I'm not for him and stuff like that he was actually pointing to. But just seeing that, like, you know, it's just like, you know, one of the things that happened out of June is like, I had a lot of friends who I had, like, people I knew, like, you know, reach out and stuff like that and say, like, are you good? And like, in a way, like, I wasn't good, but also I was like, in a way, we getting up to it. Like, we got used to it. So I'm glad people have gotten close to it, but it's sort of kind of sad, but like seeing that we've been through this for like years since like we've been born, and like now it just took like some weird time in June, which I guess all the like elements of like bullshit in 2020 like reached up to where some people got mad about it. But it's like, you know, we've been doing this. Like, one of the things I want to ask you is like, and of course I'm raising anything like that, but like, how many of you posted that Black Square on June 2nd or whatever and haven't done anything since? Because I've seen a lot of my like friends, a lot of my orgs that like old school and stuff like that posted that, but they haven't done anything. They haven't gone to any conferences. They haven't, like, you know, things like that. And it's, you know, it's just like, you know, it's sort of kind of sad seeing that you did this when it like it was for clout. I mean, you see celebrities doing it, but like now that like the dust has died down and stuff like that, you ain't talking about anti-racism, or you're not talking about like, you know, oppression anymore and stuff like that, which we'll get back into that later. But now I'm going to hand it over to you want to ask the questions?
We have can like get into questions. Virtual people are sending them in, and I have one that we got virtually that I'm just gonna start us off with because I think there's a fair amount of Greek representation here. I know we did specific outreach to Greek orgs on campus, and we got a question specifically about that. And the question was, do you feel that Greek life institutions on Denison's campus are inherently harmful and perpetuate racism on this campus? Should Greek life be abolished? What are next steps? Just take that however you like.
Would you like to go first, Alpha Man?
Sure. No. Greek life should not be abolished. But what should happen is there should definitely be more collaboration and more collaboration between the different councils, like the National Panelists Council, which is the historically Black Council, and the Multicultural Greek Council, which is the other cultures, other people of color, and their fraternities and sororities have done the work of anti-racism in their founding, in their inception. They're founded on giving a voice to Black people in that space of student development that wasn't originally intended for them. They do the work, and it's up to IFC and Panel to reach out, but not only reach out saying, hey, can we do this, but what do you want to learn? And what do you have to offer to fostering a space on this campus where Greek life is not toxic or is not racist? Because yes, there's a lot of racism in the original Greek life, white Greek life. And I know the people from my fraternity, my founders took from what the original white fraternities had because it was culturally appropriated in terms of like iconography. They took that and they turned that into what it should be as a Black fraternity, founded for community service, for community advancement and engagement. And that's the work that white fraternities need to do more, because you can see a clear difference between the MPAC, MGC, and IFC and Panhandle, is that the work the MPAC and MGC does is more community oriented, focus on the issues and the relevant topics that engage the student of the body, the students of color on campus. And that's the work that Panhandle IFC has the potential to do, but they have to be willing to offer something up in collaboration with those organizations. Like, there could definitely be more correspondence between them, but if it's not effective in terms of, well, what do you want to learn about? Like, if you want to learn about anti-racism, what have you done so far to foster anti-racism in your organization? Like, have you given money to certain organizations or institutions or agencies that have been instrumental in providing people of color an opportunity and a voice? Or do you just want to collaborate for the sake of collaborating? And we actually have to consider, like, what can we do together? Like, we're doing the work ourselves, but we're not going to continue to just do the work by ourselves. Like, that's something that's not going to be effective for white people, because it's not going to teach you anything about actually getting out there and doing the anti-racist work if we do it for you. So it should be abolished, but there should definitely be more communication and correspondence between the different councils in terms of what we want to do and how we plan to move forward with anti-racism.
I don't even know if you remember from the summer, but there's that one webpage that's like abolish Greek life. We're just like, huh? Because I'm not affiliated, but I'm just obsessed with Greek life. I find it so interesting, and like 80% of my friends are in Greek life, but it's like the Black Greek life. I've grown up around it. My mother is a part of the Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority, and my aunt, she's a part of the Delta Sigma Theta sorority, and it's just like, and many members of my church are in other Black Greek organizations. So it's infatuated. I've been infatuated with it, and it's been a part of my life since I was literally born. I have a onesie from when I was an infant that said TJK. I was like, that's no pressure at all. So it's in my life, so I have a huge opinion on it every time it's like mentioned. Because Black Greek life, I find to be extremely different from whatever white Greek life is. I don't know what you guys do. I don't understand it. I just assume the stereotype I've seen in movies is that it's just a bunch of large white dudes who wear letters and get drunk in the fancy frat houses. I don't know anything beyond that. Do I think it should be abolished? No. That doesn't make any sense. Well, just because something's problematic doesn't mean you just like get rid of it. Well, except racism, but like that's completely different. And it's just like you can just fix it because it's been around for like hundreds of years. So it's just like when I hear abolish Greek life, I look at like what Jaleel does and what my friend Rich does, who's a Phiota, and I see like this community service doing this stuff for the Denizens community, going out and cleaning, feeding the homeless, having cookouts, all this like community engagement. And I don't know what you guys do, but I'm sure it's fun too. But it's just like, why would I want to abolish that when they're doing so much for like philanthropy for so many different groups? And so like white Greek life is yes inherently racist. We went to a whole panel discussion about who was the name of that man?
Lawrence Ross.
Say it again.
Lawrence Ross.
Lawrence Ross?
Yes.
He's great. He was telling us about the inherently racist system within white Greek life. It was like SAE. These men from, what would SAE be? Sigma Alpha Epsilon. They sang the song. They got caught singing the song on a party bus, saying there will never be a nigga SAE, and we're just like, oh god. So it's just like that stuff is within it. This is like 3-4 years ago. I remember seeing it on the news, and that stuff is within these organizations, but it can be taken out and just left with like a non-problematic organization because like it's college, you want to have fun, and I hear a lot of like the sororities, at least I know, like there's an Anchor Splash from DG, someone help me, and Pi Five do something. I should know these things, but I know like good things are being done. So to take it all away just because there are problems within it, I say just focus on taking away the problems. If in another 100 years we see those problems aren't being taken away, then maybe consider again making Abolish Greek Life Instagram page. But until then, I'd say that there's enough room for growth that we don't need to take it all away. I feel like that's just extra.
All right, thanks for that. And just for the sake of time, we have some questions. Just keep your answers concise. I think the four of us can talk forever about all these topics. But back to tape.
Yeah, we're going to kind of alternate between virtual and in-person questions in fairness. So if anyone has an in-person question they'd like to ask right now, raise your hand.
Yes.
I was just wondering if non-black students are allowed to go to black student union, and if not, is there a way to help them to what activities are going on that we can learn?
Did you say that?
Yeah, so just to repeat it for, I think their question was, are non-white students able to join the Black Student Union? If not, what ways can they assist in that, correct? Okay.
I would love that. Wait, no, you should answer it because you're vice president.
Oh.
So we do not discriminate against people who are not Black. We actually do encourage people to show up to our events and support our events, especially our meetings and any other extremist program that we throw. Just like the vigil, a lot of people who are not Black showed up, and that was awesome. But as well as people who participated in Blackout Friday, it was about a month ago. So yeah, we do encourage people to come because we want to hear your voice there in that space. We talk about many of the same. We talk about race a lot in the Black Student Union, but the conversation won't move forward until we have people who don't look like us in the room with us, giving the perspective, or people who are radically different from what we think about, because those are the people that we see that cause the problem. So people who have racist ideologies, we essentially we do need you there because we need to see, why do you think that way, or why does your family think that way? What makes this right to you? Why do you rationalize using your white privilege in a way that only benefits you? And how can we kind of convert that perspective now on this campus so that when we all leave here, we can do the work of anti-racists and begin to, and you can begin to use your privilege in a constructive manner. So yes, you can show up to events, show up to meetings. We definitely encourage that. We would like to see more, just a little bit more diversity, a little bit more representation from you all, what you have to think and what you have to contribute. And you get to learn about what Black culture really is, because there's a lot of misconceptions about what it is, and those misconceptions are completely misconstrued and incorrect. So you get to meet the Black people on campus, people who are just out there as leaders, but also people who pretty much say themselves. But you also, this is a good opportunity to see the diversity within the Black community. It's not all Black people are the same. Like, Blackness isn't a monolith. So definitely come through the programming, to meetings, whatever you can make. You can send us emails, our Instagram page. There are tons of ways to get
What's the
involved.
Instagram page?
Denison BSU. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm the Minister of Records and Correspondence, a part of the BSU. So, like, if you want to be a part of it, I'll be here for like another hour. So you can like give me your email. I'll be here.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Take.
Yeah, okay, we're gonna do another question, for virtual attendees. This one's a little bit more specific, but, my family is Latinx and therefore thinks they are immune to any form of racism. When I try to have conversations about their anti-Blackness, it rarely is productive. How could I have more effective conversations surrounding anti-Black behavior while also considering my positionality as a non-Black person?
That's a great question. Because I see a lot of hatred towards Black people from the Latinx community. There's a huge question mark in my mind because it's like, you guys are being oppressed just like us. Donald Trump called you all rapists once. And you have to have these like low level jobs because, you know, they won't allow you access to so many opportunities just because you're an immigrant or because you're a brown Latinx person. This is happening to people, the white passing people from Spain. This happens to our brown brothers from across the border. And so with like addressing it, some of them refuse to understand that. And I think, you know, if I hate Black people too, that'll bring me a little closer, you know, to whiteness. That's a lot, that happens a lot in outside minority communities. And with like trying to have a more fruitful conversation, I'd say the best way is to relate it back to them in a way. That's difficult, like role to play, but one way, like, you know, when 9/11 happened, and then all of a sudden what was trending was all buildings matter. That was Black people being like, that's you, that's what you sound like. Like, it was kind of like a way to be like, oh, well, yeah, 9/11 fell, but my house is important too. Like, to kind of like relate it back to, Black people are da-da-da, but then someone said the exact same, then a white person said the exact same thing about you. Well, how'd that make you feel? Well, that's how Black people feel when you say about them. Like, it sounds like you're talking to a child, but like, it's just to like make it in a way that they can fully understand. You know, I don't like using academic language around like certain members of my family because that's like academic language is like a way to exclude people who don't have access to the education level that we do. And you know, those people deserve to understand even more than we do because we have, you know, we go to college, we go to liberal arts school. That's like one of the best educations you can get aside from Ivy League. And just because me talking and like using humongous words and academic intelligence makes you feel dumber, first of all, so you're not gonna want to listen. Me talking to you like, or my uncle, you're my cousin, you're my friend, it helps you understand that I know these things and it can make perfect, you can know these things too. It'll make perfect sense if you can just listen to me. So that's two things. Don't try to impress people with like your fancy knowledge. Talk to them like, you know, a fellow human being, not like one of your teachers, which I guess teachers are human beings. Also, like, there's so many examples within the Latinx community and the Black community. We are both highly oppressed, not in the same ways, but in very similar ways. So it can be very easy to just be like, you know, you say, oh, Black men are rapists, and Donald Trump said that about our people, or like, yeah, they said that they took our jobs, but then they said that about us. Like, then, you know, someone yelled at you at the supermarket once. Don't you feel uncomfortable when you drive past a Confederate flag? This is exactly how Black people feel, and so we should all be in this together. And just stuff like that, it can make it very simple, very concise. If you just, you know, you gotta think it out before you get there. But I think you can. I believe in you.
I would say that white supremacy thrives on encouraging non-white groups to see themselves as better than other non-white groups, right? And so the idea of Claire Jean Kim has this term she calls racial triangulation. So if we think of whiteness to Blackness as a kind of pole, right? So on one end in the American psyche is Blackness, and on the other end is like whiteness. And all non-Black and non-white groups are trying to position themselves closer to whiteness because that's where the power is, right? And the way that they do that is by living very close to black people and being very different than them, and then positioning themselves with white people in condemning blacks, right? So this happens all over. So it is a consistent thing throughout the 20th century that this has happened. The other thing is I would encourage you to use there's a textbook on sort of race and politics called Uneven Roads. And they use this metaphor of different racial groups in the United States have had different paths, different roads, right? They're not all hilly at the same time. They don't all have to build bridges at the same time in terms of chronologically. But they all face a similar set of struggles, right? They all face rivers that are not bridged. They all face places where there's a mountain and there's no road on it, right? And so they may not be encountering those at the same time in the same places, but almost all non-white racial groups in the United States have struggled with identifying themselves as full citizens in a country that is frankly built on white supremacy, right? And so being able to make those points of connections between, okay, so you realize that in Texas, there was the Hispanic and white drinking fountain, not the black and white drinking fountain, right? So like maybe not in the same places and at the same times, but white supremacy thrives on this kind of internecine warfare between non-white groups.
All right. So now, because we're going back and forth, are there any questions from the audience?
Don't be shy.
We're gonna, I was gonna say, I want to give you guys a chance to wrap up. If you have any final questions. I was gonna say, like, if you guys have questions, like, there are lots of resources out there. A lot of like the other ones I've seen, especially from the chat, like, you know, just look around and they'll talk about like where you can find answers. So if things pop up later today, right now, like you can seek out those resources. But in the interest of time, I want to give you guys a chance to like kind of wrap it up and put a period on this discussion, or not a period, but a dot maybe.
We're done?
Well, I think we can take one on Zoom. Is there any Zoom questions?
Yeah, I mean we have them. We just If you guys are good,
I'm in a rush. My class is until 2 o'clock.
That's one in that group.
All right, we'll do.
I think after that we'll have enough time to wrap up.
Okay, I think this is a good one. Can you talk? It's kind of vague, but can you talk about the ACAB movement, the All Cops Are Bastards movement, and maybe how, like, I don't know if this question is implying anything about that movement. That's all it says, but maybe like how that relates to Black Lives Matter and maybe approaching that.
I have a lot of thoughts about this. So here's the thing. We actually know from research that when non-white people and when women enter into the organization of police departments, right, they do not change the sort of structure of those systems. The structure of the system changes them, right? And so in fact, you can be an excellent individual. You can be non-racist. I'm not sure you can be anti-racist, but you can be non-patriarchal. You can believe that all people are equal. You can believe that, in fact, the police are a necessary part of the society. As an individual, you can be a great person, right? But you're entering into a structure that many people, including myself, believe is thoroughly premised on patriarchy and white supremacy, right? And that system is going to make you act like that, and it's going to reward you when you act like that, even if those are not your deeply held values, right? So we know that people of color who join the police force also engage in police brutality and in excessive force. And they do things that represent the values of the structure, not their individually held values. And so this is and again, I'm not an abolitionist, but I am definitely a give more money to social services and less money to police, right? I'm more conservative than many of my radical friends, right? But the key is this is not about individuals, right? This is about the position that you hold in the structure of oppressive power that perpetrates misogyny and white supremacy.
To add on to that, policing as an institution is fundamentally racist. It derived from slave patrols way back in those times when slavery was legal. And so if you join that institution, as Dr. Poole said, it changes you. It changes you as an individual, and it reinforces the mindset of excessive force, excessive violence, and it normalizes that for you. you begin to portray that through your actions and interactions with people of color, with people that you handle as an agent of law enforcement. And so I think that movement is just fueled by the frustration that people have against law enforcement because they perpetuate these ideals and they have the ability to change through a lot of internal restructuring, but they just refuse to. They keep it the same. And it's literally killing people. Like you're killing people because you refuse to change what this institution was founded on years ago, decades ago. And so I actually hadn't heard of the movement, but I think that I understand that the frustration and the feelings of founding the movement are reasonable because there should be no reason that these practices are still in place and that people actually agree with using that excessive and obsessive violence against people of color and not directing funds toward social services like more counselors, more school nurses, but instead we take away from that and we add to the growing problem of police brutality.
Yeah, I want to. You may not like my opinion on this, whatever. Whoever asked this question, but I am like a hashtag ACAB supporter, and but that one thing I want to make clear is another misconception. BLM and ACAB aren't the same hashtag. Like just because you believe Black Lives Matter doesn't mean you also are required to hate the police. And just because you hate the police doesn't mean that you're non-racist or supporter of Black Lives Matter. Those are two separate hashtags. I just happen to like both of them. And so when I say ACAB, I'm just like, maybe there are a couple good cops out there, but like we're saying, it's that you're indoctrinated into the system that teaches you to behave in these certain type of ways. Even if you are a Black cop, it doesn't automatically mean you're going to be a good cop. I have heard of Black cops who have killed Black men, unarmed Black men. And it's because they're cop, like they're taught to, treat people differently. Hand out water bottles to white men who are being arrested, but then tase unarmed Black men who are just, trying to cash a busted check. So it's the fact that you were part of this organization that derives from slave catchers and are still behaving in similar ways that, these Black people, animals need to be herded instead of like humans that need to be helped. Most Black people don't call the police when they're in trouble. They don't call their brother, their aunt, their somebody who's close to their family because they know that as a Black person, even if I'm being attacked, if I call the police, they're more likely to shoot me, or if there's a Black person attacking me, the both of us, because they see us as something else. And I can't even put a pin on what that is. It's just not human. To think that, like we said with Michael Brown, they shot him because he looked intimidating. I was like, we're not bulletproof. You don't need to pull out a whole round into me just because I'm Black and I'm scary. And so if anybody ever shoots me because they feel threatened, then there's something wrong because I'm 5'5" and don't know how to fight. Like, what am I scaring you with? So it's just like stuff like that is why I say ACAB, because there's so many instances of cops, female, Black, other, that just perpetuate the stereotype of she first asks questions later if they are a Black man or woman, or even POC, or even disabled. The amount of disabled people who have been killed by cops is astonishing. And it's scary, and it's tough to live by, and that's why I put the hashtag whenever I see another crooked cop doing another crooked action.
All right, so we're gonna do our final wrap up. Let's keep it at around 90 seconds.
No promises.
Like I was gonna say no promises. I'm not gonna gavel you down or anything. Thank you, Mr. Brown. I'm sorry, do it again. But let's start with you, Faith.
Wrapping up, thank you all for coming. Please take what you've learned. I've seen some people taking notes. I've seen some people nodding their heads. Some people look like they're just here because of the class, but that's okay. And all of you who have come, please take this back into your majority white spaces. Be the teacher, because it's not up to people who look like us to be the teachers all the time. I'm not getting paid for this. So just take this information to your friends and to your family and just like help be the change. Because it's honestly, we as Black people have done all we can throughout history. We try to build Black Wall Street that got bombed. We try to have a Black president, he's gone now. We can only do so much. It's up to white people to end white supremacy, to change this mindset and make us the peaceful place that America wants to be so badly.
Thank you all for coming out. As Faye said, take us back to the spaces that you are in. Talk to your friends, family members, everybody about this conversation. Keep the conversation going, and especially take us back to your student organization. Take this to your professors, and let's begin to see this work kind of play out in the Denison community first before we can kind of make it play out in the world. It's simply just not simply our responsibility, even if we're getting paid. It's like something that we all have to work on, especially white people, because of your privilege that we've been talking about this whole time and how you can use that to elevate the causes of the marginalized. So thank you for coming out. There's a plethora of resources that you can use to kind of gear yourself towards anti-racism. There's books, articles. I mean, even if you open up your Instagram page and type in anti-racism, you find just a lot of things. So please don't be afraid to do that research, and just don't be afraid to reach out and listen to the experiences of Black people on campus. I encourage you to attend Black Student Union events, but also I encourage you to begin to form collaborations with organizations on campus that are historically Black or historically of color, and begin to collaborate with a purpose and a passion in mind, and that should be anti-racism and justice. So thank you all for showing up and showing out.
I just echo everything that they said. I will say that as if any of you would like a reading list, let me know. And then I also, like, put yourself in uncomfortable situations. I think particularly as white people in a world in which whites are the majority. Here's an example. My niece grew up in rural Texas, and we went to New York City, and she went to go get beer 5 subway stops away. She came back and she was like, "That's the first time in my life I've been the only white person in a space," right? And I was like, "Good," right? Like, what did that feel like? And she basically was like, "Strange," right? And so put yourself in positions, dear white people, where you in fact know what it's like to feel different, right? And to experience that, and to talk to people who are not like you. And to learn from them. I love Jane Addams a whole lot. And one of the things that she says is we have a moral responsibility to choose our experiences in accordance with our values. If your value is to be anti-racist, if your value is racial justice, then go talk to people who are not white and ask them what that looks like to them.
Sort of kind of just to wrap up, I'm going to sort of kind of saying the same thing that the three of them said. You have to do the work. One of the things that I hope has come out of this movement, just like our discussion, is really that it's not the job of your Black friend, your Black classmate, and stuff like that to sort of kind of teach you and stuff like that. Unless you've been there's organizations, there's trainings, there's councils that do this for money and stuff like that. So it's if your organization can pay for a party, if your organization pays for things but can't pay for we call it professional development, for people that work in city development. If they can't pay for this training or for this session, then sort of kind of I don't know. But just you got to be able to put money towards it and stuff like that. We're not saying that you need to be there was a video of a white woman outside yelling, they're "I am sorry for being white." You don't need to do that, okay? So
It's quite uncomfortable sometimes.
yeah, every time you meet a Black person, you have to be Black power, or hold up the fist and be "I'm sorry," it's just please stop and stuff like that. But mom used to always say actions speak louder than words. So sort of kind of Dr. Poole was saying, you have to go into those uncomfortable situations. If your fraternity brother is saying something that is wrong, you need to be "That's wrong, Bill." I have terrible generic. It's always Bill and Sally. If you're in I gotta do the same. If you're in a sorority and Sally's saying some out of pocket stuff, you need to. I know there's probably no Sally in a sorority. If there's a Sally in a sorority, I'm pretty sure you're pretty cool. But stuff like that, you need to be able to call them out and be "Hey, this isn't right." You need to be able to if you're a department, if you're part of an academic part, if you're part of different things on campus and they're not collaborating they said our C3 orgs, if they're not reaching out about these things, you need to be "Hey, we need to do an event and stuff like that." One of the things that I'm planning, and a lot of the C3 and Click is planning, is things about cultural appropriation, because I'm tired of seeing people with a medicine wheel. I'm tired of seeing people with the dream catcher. I'm tired of seeing people dressed up like I hate Pocahontas. Not the actual Pocahontas, because there's that fictional one. I just hate Disney for that and stuff like that. But it's stop wearing sombreros and ponchos and stuff like that. It's racist and stuff like that. So it's please make sure this is the first step. There's going to be so many events and stuff over the next couple of weeks, next semester that does it. So like, make sure you keep showing up. Make sure you're bringing these things back to those people that aren't coming back, that aren't, didn't come this time. You're bringing it back to your spaces because like if you just come here, hear this, and then don't do anything with it, like there's no point of us talking. Like, one of the things that we were kind of fear of when we started this is that like it was gonna be like this room full of people who look like us and it's just gonna be like preaching to the choir. So once again, it's great to see people that like don't look us in here, but make sure that like it's like we planted the seed. You got to go grow it. You got to go spread it around and stuff like that. So that's all I got, and I'll hand it over back to Tate.
Yeah, just shout out to Tate for organizing all this. And Jacob, I think. If you want to learn about anti-racism, talk to them because they're great examples.
And then also just want like, since I'm like staff and stuff, I know like she's part of a lot of like what she's done like books and things like she has books like I'm here to help. I'm located on the first floor of Shoney Hall, and now you can start contract work on campus and stuff like that. But like let me know I'm here to help and stuff like that. I sort of kind of said like it's not up to like people of color like do the work. Like I'm someone like diversity, inclusion, social justice, anti-racism is like my passion. So please like email me what's the identity and also like it's sort of kind of creepy how easy it is to find someone at directory. Because at my school we didn't have anything like that. But like find like I'm here to help. So like in any orgs and stuff like that, please reach out and stuff like that. But yeah, that's all I got.
Great. Thank you guys. We also have 56 people on Zoom. So we had like over 100 people, which is awesome. And like we said at the beginning, thank you all for coming and speaking. This was great. And we will be doing, this is like a little bit of a shameless plug. We'll be doing another panel tonight in the 4th floor Slater Auditorium from 7 to 8 with the poli-sci department on domestic and foreign policy. So another great T-Votes event to show up to, and in terms of showing up to events, like, talk to Yaz, talk to Jaleel, like, talk to other people on this campus, and Des, like, to keep showing up to stuff like this because it's happening, and you just might not know about it. Cool. Great to meet you guys. Yeah.